This is Go Nitro, Rise of the Blades. Chapter 4, A Mission. Nick and the others followed closely behind Redmond as they snaked their way through hallways they hadn't even known existed. Redmond was like a trained mouse in the maze, knowing exactly where to turn and where to do it. As the Nitros passed by other lab workers, they would immediately stop, stare at the five, and whisper to one another. As they passed another startled group, Dante leaned closer to Nick and spoke very softly. I get that some of these people are seeing us for the first time, but this doesn't exactly look like excitement to me, he stated. Nick leaned in as well, not looking at Dante, but getting closer. What do you mean? Dante motioned towards another group as they all avoided eye contact and quietly murmured to one another. It almost looks like they're afraid of us. Megan stepped up between the two Brunos and made her way past them. As she did, she turned her head over her shoulder. Wouldn't you be? She asked. She continued past them, leaving Nick to just shrug back to Dante. As the group continued around another bend, Redmond came to a stop in front of a large metal door. He lifted his hand to a red panel next to the frame and laid his palm flat across it. The device scanned each of his fingers, tracing circles around them and beeping quietly while it did. A few seconds later, the door churned to life and began to slowly slide out of the way. Nick examined the panel as the group entered the new room. So Redmond, he started. Redmond glanced back, but continued on his path forward. How do you, afford all this stuff? Redmond smirked. Do you know why we call our city Lattice Light? He asked, instead of giving an immediate response. Sure, Diego began. It's the street grid. City used to be called, New Exeter, Megan finished. Was the first city in the U.S. to adopt the street grid as a full standard. Fully autonomous cars. They renamed it for the blue lights coming out of the sides of the street. Looks like a lattice pattern from above. Redmond nodded as he approached the center of the large room they had entered. The mechanics under the asphalt don't just direct the vehicles, Megan, he added. It powers them. The longer the cars spend on the road, the more energy they gain from it. All that energy is fed in through solar panels along the buildings and hydroelectricity generated from the currents in the ocean. Looks like you know a lot about it, Nick pointed out. Redmond shrugged and leaned over a large desk in front of him. I assume I should. I'm the man who invented it. That and many other things to better help the advancement of mankind. He put out his hands. Hence, the funding. Nick raised an eyebrow and inspected the room around him. It was enormous. Several tables and chairs were strewn across the floor, while Redmond's desk sat in the center and up a few steps from ground level. A massive computer screen essentially covered an entire wall, with several control panels underneath it that Nick could never hope to understand. Displayed across the screen was a wireframe map of Lattice Light City. Nick couldn't help but move closer as his curiosity grew. He looked over the city at each building and alleyway. He had been in the city many times before, but the streets and towers now had a very different meaning to him. Somewhere in the shadows, the person responsible for his family was hiding. Nick leaned forward to get a better look and rested his hands on the panels below the screen. Almost instantly after his hands made contact, a voice cried out. Watch it! It shouted. Nick snapped away from the board and turned to face the woman standing next to him. She was holding several binders, each stuffed to the brim with papers. Her red top perfectly matched her fiery red hair, which was curled up in a bun. She had pale, freckled skin and large glasses that seemed to magnify her eyes. That is very sensitive equipment. One wrong move, and we shut down an entire section of the street grid. Nick folded his hands behind his back and took a few more steps away. Sorry, he muttered. I didn't. Kristen, Redmond interjected. He turned to the others and motioned towards her. Nitros, this is Kristen McConnell. She's the head tech around here. Keeps the grid up and running, as well as everything in this building. No easy task. Not at all, she added. Still, pleased to meet you. I've heard so much about you. She took hold of the binder topping her stack. I mean, how could I not? The Nitros, my gosh! She handed the binder to Nick and continued to move towards the rest, handing them each a binder as she went. Nick looked over the cover, squinting at the title etched into it. Kristen was still talking in the background, but her words seemed to fade out as Nick's attention fell elsewhere. Subject nuclear, he asked. He turned to look up at Redmond, shaking the binder a bit while he did. That doesn't sound good. Redmond chuckled and adjusted his glasses. Believe me, it is, he replied. He stepped down from his desk and walked towards Nick. Like it or not, that's you. He pointed his finger at Nick's chest as he made the remark. Nick shook his head for a second and then looked down at the binder again. He opened the front cover, revealing the first page contained an image of him with all of his information scribbled next to it. His name, his home, height, weight, hobbies, blood type, everything. As he turned more pages, the information became harder and harder to understand until it eventually became gibberish that would make Einstein scratch his head. I'm subject nuclear? Well, yes. I told him the name was stupid, Kristen noted as she took her seat in front of the computer. Subject blast? Dante asked from across the room. Redmond nodded again while pointing down at the binder. You see, each one of your enhancers has a little bit of Otrolium laced in, Redmond explained. It's what we use to bind the chemicals to your DNA. Hold up, Steven interrupted. Didn't you say that stuff was dangerous? Yeah, like super radioactive dangerous, Dante added, flailing his hands around. Not in the amounts we used, Redmond assured, but we decided to base your codenames off of its explosive nature. Codenames, Nick asked. Seriously. We're not exactly hiding our identities from people. No, said Kristen. But Redmond thinks having names like that will raise the spirits of people in the city. Like superheroes or something. Exactly, Redmond agreed. The citizens of Lattice Light City need figures they can look up to. Not just another human, they need something more. Something they truly believe can fight against the Blades. Nick sighed. He closed the binder and walked away from Redmond towards one of the tables. If that's what you want, then fine, Redmond, Nick said calmly. Feel free to call me Nuclear, then. Dante nodded and slapped his binder closed, making it echo in the room. Subject blast, reporting for duty, he chimed off while deepening his voice. He closed his other hand into a fist and punched the air in front of him a few times. Yes! That sounds so awesome! And I guess that makes me Reactor, Megan added, pointing to the cover of her binder. Not bad. Could have been worse. Like Atomic, Diego asked. 'Cause, that's what mine says. Steven stepped up to stand next to Diego, holding his binder down by his side. Mine says Project Explosion, he muttered. He lifted his hands out to the sides a bit before letting them drop back down. You just ran out of names, didn't you? Haha, yes! Blast laughed excitedly. Blast, Nuclear, Reactor, Atomic, Explosion, he rattled off the names, pointing powerfully at each member as he called them. A real superhero team! Oh, this is so badass! He turned to Nuclear and leaned in, talking a little quieter. This is like a freaking comic book, dude! You think that's what makes this a comic book? Reactor asked. Blast and Nuclear turned to look at her, seeing she was now standing against another wall in the room, examining 6 glass tubes. Inside of them were 6 uniforms, displayed proudly on the bodies of mannequins. The material making up most of the suits seemed stretchy, yet at the same time thick and strong, like a type of carbon fiber disguised as fabric. The combat boots were heavily padded on the bottom and sported several buckles along the sides. The top and bottom sections of the uniform connected at the waist underneath a thick belt, sporting a buckle with the letter N engraved across it. The suits were all identical, except for one key feature. The boots, belt, designs along the chest, and inner parts of the legs were a different color on each suit. You've got to be kidding me, Explosion groaned as he stepped closer to them. Ah, yes, Redmond chimed in happily. These suits aren't just for looks, everyone. They are specifically designed to handle your unique abilities. For example, Nick's suit can withstand extremely high temperatures, while Steven's is designed to blend in with the darkness of the void, making him nearly invisible when he's in shadows. Nuclear stepped towards the red uniform and reached out, lightly touching the glove. Permeated, Redmond noted. Small, almost undetectable pores in the fabric, so any fire you create from your hand doesn't remain trapped underneath the suit. Nuclear wanted to smile and was somehow finding it difficult. The suits were definitely stylish, but something was throwing him off about them. It only took a few more seconds to realize exactly what it was. Hey, Redmond, he began. The professor glanced over, ready to answer whatever questions Nuclear had brewing. I'm guessing this red suit is mine, Redmond nodded. Silver for Dante. Blast! Nuclear's cousin corrected, almost before Nuclear had finished speaking. Shut up, he snapped back at him. Purple for Megan, green for Diego, and black for Steven, right? Redmond continued to nod throughout. That's correct. Excellent guesswork, Nicholas. I tried to base the color scheme on your powers as best I could. I'm not really much of a designer. My main concern was with their function. Yeah, Nuclear said quickly, trying to finish his thought. That's fine, Professor, but what's with the sixth one? You know, the blue one. The others followed Nuclear's stare and also found themselves looking at a sixth uniform. While the other 5 suits were lit up and nicely displayed, this one was left dark and almost seemed to just blend into the background, like it was trying to be forgotten. Yes, Redmond said quietly, almost like he was admitting something. There was once going to be a 6th Nitro. It was in the original plans, but unfortunately never ended up happening. He motioned towards Kristen, who still had one binder under her hands. Nuclear turned to her and she immediately handed it to him. Nuclear ran his hand over the cover, tracing his finger across the name. Project Uranium, he whispered to himself. Too unstable, Redmond answered before Nuclear could even ask the question. That particular enhancement was one of my earliest designs when Project Nitro was being developed. It didn't hold up to my standards. Clearly it went pretty far, Reactor pointed out. I mean, you made the suit, you still have the file. Because there's still hope for it, he replied. But not now. There are more important things on the agenda than perfecting something we don't need. For example, your first mission assignment. Redmond turned to Kristen and gave a small nod, signaling her to begin typing away on the computer. Within seconds, the massive screen was completely filled with information. Words, formulas, and images detailing a device spinning in the center. The machine looked like a small metallic box with 2 empty circular slots in the center. Several large pipes extended off the box and connected to a large metal tube next to it. Nuclear read through the measurements and was shocked to discover the machine stood over 8 feet tall. Wow, Atomic muttered, stepping forward to stand next to Nuclear. What the heck is that thing? This, Redmond began, is the Ultrolium Matter Converter. This machine is how we manufacture the substance. Items go in the tube, and the energy from the atoms and electrons within the item is harvested. The item is destroyed, but Ultrolium is the product. The converter is the only way to make more of the Ultrolium, meaning the Blades have been after it for years. Not to step out of line here, Professor, Reactor said, holding out one of her hands, but why not just destroy it? Because I've received specific orders to avoid that at all costs, Redmond replied. You need to understand that Ultrolium is the closest thing humanity has to an alternate fuel source. Destroying the converter now would be like stepping 50 years into the past. Uncountable amounts of progress and innovation gone in an instant. Okay, Blast interrupted. We get it. Destroying the machine, bad. So what's your plan? The government has granted me access to one of the most secure facilities in the nation. Your job will be to safely escort the converter there. What? Kristen asked, turning from the computer. You mean it's not already in one? Redmond shook his head, but didn't actually look at Kristen. We've had it hidden in this lab since the project began. It's here? She exclaimed again. Yes, which is why the Nitros will be making sure there are no issues with the drop-off. It should be simple, as long as the Blades don't catch wind. Get the converter to the base, lock it up, and check that worry off our list. Almost as soon as Redmond's mouth closed, a red light on the ceiling began to flash and rotate around the room. Accompanying it was a blaring siren. The information on the screen quickly vanished one line at a time and was replaced by a map of Lattice Light City. The map zoomed into a specific block and flashed a red dot over a building near the water. That escort might have to wait, Redmond, Kristen reported in almost a panic. We have police reports coming in from a warehouse on the docks. After a few more lightning-fast keystrokes, words and stats began to appear next to the building on the map. Warehouse 77. Armed soldiers with blade markings were seen forcing their way inside. Redmond squinted his eyes and walked away from his desk, getting a closer look at the screen. Warehouse 77, he reiterated. He didn't speak for a few seconds while his brain processed the information. Nuclear could see Redmond trying to reach some conclusion, but something seemed to be stopping him. That facility has already been cleared out. There shouldn't be any Ultrolium there anymore. Why would the Blades be attacking it? Maybe you missed some? Blast suggested. Unlikely, Kristen responded. She slowly turned away from the computer, ignoring everyone else in the room and setting her eyes right on Redmond's. Patrick Zelo is leading the group. Redmond's eyes widened. Stunner. Without hesitation, he turned and ran to the uniforms. He furiously typed into a keypad in front of them, causing the glass coverings to move away. The mannequins within the suits began to shrink down, allowing the uniforms to collapse down to the bottom of the tubes. Redmond, what the hell is going on? Nuclear demanded, with his arms out to the sides. Stunner is a high-ranking member of the Blades, Redmond responded, without turning away from the keypad. We don't think he has direct contact with the Blade leader, but he probably knows someone who does. Redmond pushed away from the tubes, taking Nuclear's suit with him. What's with the name? Atomic asked. Stunner? He constructed a portable device that he wears on his back. It funnels the energy of Ultrolium into tangible light. It funnels the energy of Ultrolium into tangible beams of light. The device is so destructive, the LLPD has been given strict orders not to engage him. Luckily, Redmond began, throwing the uniform to Nuclear. You aren't part of the LLPD. Nuclear looked down at his suit, running his thumb on the thick but flexible material. The red color was bright and new. He could almost see his own reflection in the shine of the fabric. So what's the mission? He asked, slowly looking back up. Redmond glanced at each of the Nitros before taking a deep breath and folding his arms. The converter will have to wait. Get to the warehouse, stop the Blades from getting whatever it is they're after. Disarm Stunner, and get him to tell us where we can find the Blade leader. Nuclear turned to look at Blast, who was now retrieving his suit from the tube. The other Nitros filing in to do the same. How are we getting there? You got a car or something? Yes, actually, Redmond responded while examining a few more items on the screen. I've been working on a custom vehicle that I can control from here using the grid. Should be able to transport you anywhere in the city within minutes. Sweet! Blast yelled. He lifted his hand and moved it across the air in front of him, like he was highlighting a headline in the news. The Nitro Mobile! It isn't finished yet, Redmond snapped. It needs more work, and it absolutely will not be titled the Nitro Mobile. Atomic has been practicing an ability that can move you across the asphalt at a rapid pace. He'll get you there. Nuclear looked towards Atomic, who gave him a quick nod. They don't know you're here, Redmond added. The Blades have no idea what they're up against now. Nuclear returned his gaze to Redmond as the professor took one last breath, calming his nerves. I think it's time we showed them. And then that's the end of Chapter 4. All right. Thanks for tuning in for another stream. I will see you guys Sunday at 7 p.m. Central Time. We'll be playing probably some Grand Theft Auto, doing some cunning stunts. So make sure that you're a part of the Monster Truck group on the crew in GTA. And that way we can all play together and have a lot of fun. Good night, everybody. And I will see you next time. Bye-bye.